Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. It's another episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And on today's episode, Andrew and I are doing a two schools of thought, hardwood floors versus matted floors in your training space. You know, you know what? This could be the most controversial episode we've ever done. Of all the things we've done, this could be the one that gets people really bent out of shape. And I would find that so funny. But I'm actually I know our audience pretty well, and I've got a feeling that this might stir the pot. But I look forward to that. As always, you're welcome to send us feedback. Uh, Andrew at whistlekick.com. You can also email me. Jeremy at whistlekick.com. Other things that you should know. Whistlekick.com for all the things that we do to help you, the traditional martial artists of the world. Everything from our school owners program, Whistlekick Alliance, to our training programs, our apparel, all of the things available at whistlekick.com. This website, this show has its own website, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. And what are you going to find over there? Every episode we've ever done, as well as transcripts, as well as, let's see what else is over there. Links, photos, videos, and in no small part to our partners, we have all of those things. That was a terrible sentence, Jeremy. I'm going to keep going. Martialytics is one of our partners. What is Martialytics? Martialytics is the best offering because we've evaluated them all. And we chose them in the martial arts school management space. Why did we pick them? Because they are affordable. The functions they have work really well. It's not a lot of fluff. The people over there are great. They have wonderful support. The product is stable. And every school that signs up through our links gets double the trial period. You get 60 days to check it out. So go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, hit the partners tab at the top, and sign up for Martialytics. You might also check out Kataro. They're not sponsoring this episode, but we love them too. All right, Andrew. Hardwood floors versus matted floors.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny about this, you and I both started training a while ago.
hmm
I don't I don't know of any schools that had matted floors when I was growing up. I don't think any of them did. Did you have?
Oh yeah. Yep. The
You knew schools that had mats back then?
my school did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep. When I first started training in high school, the school that I trained at had the really nice tatami mats,
Okay.
like
Cool.
the 2 foot by 4 foot gray, like two and a
Yeah.
half inch thick. Um, yeah. So we had training
Okay.
mats.
Okay. We had mats hanging on the walls that we would take down if we were doing rolls or certain self-defense work.
hmm
But I grew up in an old high school gymnasium. It sounds funny to say I grew up in martial arts, so that's kind of also where I grew up. But I grew up in an old high school gymnasium, and most of the places that I trained for a long time were hardwood floors. And I remember the first time I trained on mats, and it was so different.
Yeah, it definitely is different. And I want to backtrack really quickly. You mentioned
Okay.
this might be a really controversial episode. Keep in mind, if you're listening, we're not going to tell you which one's better. We're just going to talk about the pros and cons of both, right? We're not saying one is better than the other. We're
Two
going to
schools of
talk
thought.
about our experiences in both and some things to consider. And maybe you're listening to this because you're a soon to be school owner and you're trying to decide. Like there are pros and cons to both, but yeah, I have done the gymnasium thing as well. But the very first school I trained at in high school, we had really nice tatami mats. Um, and I'm thinking the other school, there was another really large martial arts school in town as well. And when they first started, they did not have mats. And you know what? I think they still don't have mats. That school is still around. They're very large. The school is very large, and they still have a hardwood floor. So there you go.
You know, there are a few things that we can say very definitively in terms of one versus the other. Mats are expensive. They are more difficult to clean.
hmm
Uh, they are safer. Hardwood floors, more stable, easier to clean. Assuming they already exist, they're less costly.
Hmm.
I would assume that even starting from scratch, setting up a basic hardwood floor would be cheaper than setting up whatever your floor is, plus putting the mats on top of it. Hardwood floors, more traditional.
Hmm.
Is there anything else really cut and dry that's basically objective that we can say about one versus the other?
Um, I mean, you mentioned the mats are safer. Obviously, the converse is that is hardwood floors can be more dangerous. Um,
Well, if mats are safer, hardwood floors are less safe.
yeah, yeah.
And
Um,
it doesn't mean that everybody's dying because of a hardwood floor.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, of course. Not having mats also is easier if you are using someone else's space. If you are using, for example, if you're renting a room at the local church to teach your school out of, you're not gonna it's more accessible because you're not trying to find a location with mats already.
We can all but say with object as an objective statement, if you are if you don't have a dedicated space, you're probably not going to have mats. You might have some mats, but you're probably not using an entirely matted floor unless you're using somebody else's martial arts school,
Yep, yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think we can say that there is some. It is easier to find a location without mats. We could say
Yep.
that. I think here's one that I'm kind of going back and forth on in my head. Which is more versatile? You can put mats on a non-matted floor, on a hardwood floor. You're probably not putting hardwood on top of mats,
Yeah, that's true.
right? So I think, if I'm thinking about all the things that we might do, it's probably easier to set up, say, for breaking on a hardwood floor versus mats.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think I would say a hardwood floor is more flexible as a training floor
Yeah,
than mats.
and more, and I'm putting this in air quotes for those that are not watching, but we'd love for you to watch. Go to YouTube to watch
Should
all
always
of these,
watch. You
and
can
hit
see
the
our
like
shiny
and
head.
subscribe. That's right, and you can hit the like and subscribe button. That really helps us out. But it is more quote unquote realistic because if you get attacked out on the street, you are probably not going to get attacked on mats.
But I'm actually going to challenge that one a little bit. So one of the things that I think we can say, hardwood floors are more stable
Hmm.
because they don't move at all. They are hardwood floors. They are, assuming they're built well, they don't move when you step on them or jump on them or stomp on them. Mats do move a little bit. And if you are someone who wears shoes out in your day-to-day environment, training barefoot on hardwood floors is, and we've talked about this on the show, is a departure from your real world implementation of your martial arts training. If you're a stand-up striker, training on mats barefoot gets closer to what you would need of wearing shoes because there's some instability there. If you're a grappler, training on the hardwood floor is probably closer, though I don't know any grappling schools that train exclusively on hardwood.
Mm. Yeah, and the other quote, again air quotes, realistic part is as a partner, as the person who's maybe getting thrown, falling on and doing break falls on mats, obviously safer, but out in the real world, you're not going to have those mats. So training on the hardwood is a little more, again, air quotes, realistic. I actually trained in a school that would occasionally go outside and work out on the pavement and do throws slowly and as safely as
Right,
possible, just to get used to doing our break falls. First we would do it on the grass, so it's still hard ground, very different from the mats, and then
sure.
we would move on to the pavement, just to I was going to say signify, but not signify, just to help simulate. That's what I was looking for. Simulate what you might encounter out in an altercation. So
Yeah,
there's something to be considered there as well.
there's a biting off the yawn. growing up, because we had these two mats, it was old high school gym, basketball hoops, and there were these crash mats on the wall
Hmm.
underneath. You've probably seen them, but they were set up in such a way we could take them off and we could use them as rolling mats. And you can imagine, I think at the peak that school had 40, 50 people on the floor. It was a big space and two mats. And so what would tend to happen as people got better is some of the higher ranks would do kind of what you're talking about, going outside, ground, pavement, and they would work obviously in a very different way. Some of these rolls and falls and things in a more realistic environment. And again, that brings us to the versatility of the hardwood floor, because if someone's training on mats, you probably don't have a different softness levels of your mats, right? It's probably not, that's the very squishy corner for the low ranks, and that's the very firm corner for the high ranks. I mean, actually, that'd be kind of neat, but
Mm.
um, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I mean the only way
So,
you get that, and actually, I actually do know of a school that has that. Uh,
really?
yeah, and you know the school as well.
Oh,
They
okay.
but the difference is for this
Yeah.
school is they purchased an entire building which has 4 or 5 different training rooms, and I suspect it has to do with financial considerations. Not all of the rooms are matted the same way, and some
Sure.
I believe some just are carpet on top of concrete. And so this particular school has the ability to do that within their building, but the schools I've been in, we had mats inside, and then we would have to go to another location. Now that other location was just outside the door, but we could then do things on grass and pavement. But in your school, yeah, it's very difficult to do.
So a lot of what we're talking about thus far has been very, if not objective, it's been close. We haven't really stirred the
Hmm.
pot yet. Let's get a little more subjective, a bit more opinionated. I don't like training on mats. I don't like it.
Hmm.
I don't feel I can connect to the ground. I can't grip the mats the same way I can grip hardwood. I don't get the same response. If energy comes from your relationship to the ground, I don't have as good of a relationship to the ground. My power is compromised. My speed is compromised. I feel like you ever trained in water? I'm sure you've trained in water, trained
Yep.
in a lake or something, right? I feel like it reminds me of that. Not nearly as much, right? Training up to your neck in water is slow motion. But when I'm training on mats, I kind of want to bounce, right? Like there's an instinct to compress and ride the re-expansion of the mat, and there's a delay there. And
Mm.
obviously I can train that out. But when I'm on hardwood, I feel solid.
Hmm. So it's interesting. I, for the most part, agree with you, but I also want to say that I used to train in a school that was their classes are held at the local Eagles Club, the fraternal order, and we came in once a week and moved the tables and chairs, and we had this room, but it was concrete with tile on top of concrete, and that's very different from hardwood floors. I mean, we're saying hardwood floors. My envision my in my head when I mentioned this topic wasn't so much necessarily hardwood, but just hard floors. But I do
Batted
think,
versus firm surface.
yeah, yeah. But I do
Yeah.
think I enjoy training on hardwood because there is some give a little bit, you know.
Compared to concrete, yeah.
Correct,
Yeah,
and
for
as
sure.
opposed to tile on concrete, that was not a
No.
great training surface because there
Yeah,
was
there's no
zero.
subfloor there.
Yeah,
And
exactly,
I
exactly.
suspect that that's mostly what it is, that there's some manner of subfloor. There might be, I'm not a flooring person, but there might be a little bit of a pad or something in between the
So
concrete and the
so
hardwood.
for me, like I also think there's a huge difference
Mm,
and in matted floors from if you're on a hardwood floor and someone lays down a mat which can slide around, that's one thing. If you are in a dedicated space that is completely
it's
matted
true.
24 hours a day, it's and they don't move, that's
It was done
huge.
well.
That can
I've
make a
trained on
huge
some that were
difference.
not done well. There were gaps. Don't stand over on that edge. That you'll lose the toe there. Um, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. it also depends on what's under the mats. Is
Yep.
it I've trained on mats that are on raw concrete.
Hmm.
I've trained on mats that were on top of hardwood floors, or something similar, right? So again, there's a little there's more give, and
And
yeah,
it
yeah,
also depends
squish
on the
versus non-squish.
it also depends on the type of mat. Yeah, I mean that's getting into the squish versus non-squish. Like the 1 inch interlocking foam mats that are usually 2 feet by 2 feet. Often they come in like red or blue, reversible, different colors on either side. Right, that's one type of mat which I've seen a lot. But then you've got the mats like you were talking about that are on the walls of gymnasiums that you can kind of tear down, like that type, 2.5 inches or so, but fairly squishy. But then if you look at actual tatami mats, the 2 foot by 4 foot, usually gray, you find them in a lot of Aikido schools. They're also 2.5 inches, but the squish level is very different from the crash mats in a gymnasium. And all of those things make a difference for sure.
Too. What I'm realizing is I mean, you know me, most of the audience knows me to be quite the nerd. And so I tend to think of things in a lot of very left brain nerdy ways. And what was coming to mind was a graph of how much I want to train on mats versus the intensity of the training, but more so the risk that comes from the intensity of the training.
Mm,
The more risky it is, the more I want mats.
sure.
Right? If you and I are sparring, because you and I have worked together plenty, if you and I are sparring and we're working some stuff out, assuming your foot was back to 100%, I don't think either of us would have any problem doing basic level self-defense, not so much throws, but sweeps on hardwood, on some kind of hard surface,
Hmm.
because we could do it slowly and gently and mitigate the risk. And, we both know how to break fall basically enough that well enough that it's not going to be super risky. But the moment we push that up, where the speed's pushed up, or maybe it's a little more freeform, then I'm going, could I at least have a mat for where my hand's slapping out? We keep going a little bit further. I still trust you. I'm still feeling safe in what you're doing, but I'm not safe from the physics of what we're doing.
Yep. Yep. And I think it correlates to, like you said, what we're doing. If you and I are just standing up doing kickboxing sparring, right, where we're not going to be doing grabs and takedowns, like we would have no problem being on hardwood floors. But if we are decided, you know what, let's switch into and do a judo class now, I suspect that if you're a multi-level black belt in judo, you probably have no problem doing those types of falls and things on much harder surfaces. But as a beginner, I'm not a judoka. I don't train judo on a regular basis. I'm not going to feel comfortable doing those type. And you, it's the same way. We are not going to feel comfortable working with each other doing judo out on the street.
And we've talked about this before, and again, this is my nerdy, and I'm pretty sure we've talked a bit about this on the show. What I have termed my universal progress equation, right? It's safety plus discomfort over
Mm-hmm.
duration and frequency. And so that's what we're bringing in here. It's the safety and the discomfort. If I am uncomfortable and unsafe, I cannot make progress. That's testing, right? Testing is valuable, and maybe it's a black belt test, maybe it's a competition. Testing is outside the equation, but for training purposes, yeah, I'm going to need some manner of environment that keeps me safe, whether that's the mats or the reduced intensity, or I've worked with some people who are amazing grapplers, wonderful judoka, and they just kind of balance me on their hip and then
Sure.
they set me down. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. It's like I don't know, it's like being a little kid again.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I think all of those things are things to consider. It has to do with what we're doing.
And I think, most schools, if you have a hardwood floor, you have the option of having a few mats.
Hmm.
You don't need a matted space 100% of the time for anything.
Absolutely.
If you have, I would venture that unless you have some ridiculously densely packed space, you have enough room to appropriately store a few folding mats.
with
You know,
the
they
ex-
can. I've
with the exception of if you don't own that space. If you come in, again, church, I'm thinking if you're working at a church or someplace, you may not have the ability to store it there.
no, but in assuming you do not have a very small car,
Hmm.
you can probably bring them in, right? Because if you have 200 students, you can probably afford a large enough vehicle to put 4 or 5 mats in.
Hmm.
If you have students, you have a bicycle, you can put straps on it and wear it on your back, right? Like it should more or less scale that as you have more students and need more mats, there's more money to buy mats. And if there isn't, you should talk to me because I will help you. That's not the intent of this conversation, though. I like the versatility. I like the old school feel, and I gotta. I'm trying to think of how to say this. Okay, here's how I'm going to say this. The default is a hard floor, not necessarily hardwood, but a hard floor,
Hmm.
versus the default is mats. There is an unconscious tone to the space. And for some people, that the tone of that matted space, and you know what I mean, Andrew, and I don't know that everybody out there is going to know what I mean, but there's a every training environment has energy. If you've trained at 3 or 4 different environments, you know that they're all a little different. And even if you can't put your finger on it, there are aspects to training in some spaces that you like more than others. Like, I don't know if you can tell right now, I'm in this, I'm dog sitting, I'm out in the sunroom. It's a beautiful view, hardwood floors. This would be a great training environment.
Hmm.
I could take the same room, put it somewhere else without all the windows, without the view of the water and the mountains, would not be as nice of a training environment. The floor is the same,
Hmm.
but there's something about the environment, the energy. I don't know that we need to belabor what that is, but the energy that I feel when I'm in a matted space versus the energy I feel in a hardwood space, I think there's something to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. I totally see that. And I again, like we said at the beginning, there's no right or wrong answer whether your school has mats or not. I
Yeah.
think if it's not a dedicated matted space, I think you can be smart about the types of mats you get. The school I mentioned that was at the Eagles Club, totally concrete floor with just linoleum tiles down. The instructor for the school had 4 mats. That's it, just 4. He had a pickup truck, so he just threw them in the back of his truck, and they were the type of foam that you would get in your gymnasium wall, but they had Velcro on 2 sides, so he could either line all 4 of them up in one really long line. If we were going to be doing rolls, we could, all single file and do a couple of rolls all the way down, or he could set it up in a really big square if we were doing partner work and whatnot. So I mean, you can be smart about how you use the mats, but again, they were mats on a hardwood floor, so they would move around occasionally. So that's something to keep in mind.
It's true. It's true. Um, here's the last, and I wasn't intending to save this for the end, but maybe this is my wild card. If you want to do realistic training wearing street clothes, I don't know anybody that's letting me wear my street shoes on mats.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point.
I can always, if there's a little bit of dirt on my shoes, yeah, I can sweep that up on the nice floor, on the hard floor. But, some rugged boots on those mats, mats aren't gonna fare well under that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot to consider when you're looking at both hardwood and or hard surfaced training facility or mats.
So here's who I want to hear from. I want to hear from a few different kinds of people. I want to hear from schools that started with one and changed to the other, especially if you changed back. I definitely want to hear from those folks. I want to hear from people who've trained in different environments. You know, I go over here and it's hardwood. I do roughly the same thing over here and it's mats. I'm over here and it's, tile or astroturf or something else that's, pretty sturdy. And, different mats over here. What is that like to switch from one to the other in your training? And then also people who train, and this might be our BJJ contingent, people who train on different mats with different levels of squishiness and how that affects what you do. Because it's, a lot of folks in the BJJ space, I'm not saying that training is a game, but there is an inherent gamification, I think, that comes to bear in a lot of BJJ schools. And does it, quote, mess with your game to go back and forth in different mats? Or maybe, you competed and the mats were much squishier or much firmer than what you're used to. And did that affect how you rolled? And so I'm curious to hear from anyone, of course, but those groups of people specifically. Jeremy at whistlekick.com. Anything else we should add before we roll out?
I think that's pretty good.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all of you out there spending some time with us today. You can email Andrew at whistlekick.com. Make sure you have subscribed everywhere you can do so for this show. Spotify, YouTube, and any podcast player of your choice are the prime ones. And we haven't asked for it in a while, but please leave us reviews. It does help us, surprisingly enough. We've kind of killed it on Apple Podcasts, but we've had a couple, less than 5 stars come in recently, and it's kind of irritating because we work so hard for you. So if you haven't left one on Apple Podcasts, even if you don't have an Apple device, you can still create an account and leave one, please. Spotify, of course, is where we're growing the most right now, and we're starting to get video versions of these podcasts on Spotify. Thank you to Andrew, and thank you to Spotify for letting us. For a while, they said, you should do this. And we went, okay. But we couldn't do it. They wouldn't let us. But now they let us. So yay. So you can watch the video versions over on Spotify as well. Please leave us a review there. But then if you want really the most video content, the shorts, all the things that we're doing, that's YouTube. And you can find us over there. You can and should subscribe, turn on notifications, because we're dropping an ever increasing number of shorts on YouTube, segments from the episodes that you can go back and rewatch and say, that was a really poignant quote. What was that again? Yeah, you can rewatch or re-listen to the whole episode, but some of the cool stuff we break out for you just to make your lives better. Thank you to Martialytics. Make sure if you have a martial arts school, you've at least checked out Martialytics. If you haven't, you're being silly because you get a 60-day trial and it probably costs less money than what you're using. If anything, if you're not using anything, it's definitely more functional than your spreadsheet. I could show you tell you what, if somebody doesn't believe me that it's going to make them more money, if you have more than, let's see, doing quick math, if you have more than, I would say, 13 to 15 students, you are probably going to save money on Martialytics. I would work that math with you. Your social media everywhere is at Whistlekick, and I think that's all we've got. Anything I'm missing, Andrew?
So the only thing that I wanted to make sure to mention at the end here is that we Whistlekick have over 1,000 episodes, right?
We do.
1,025 as of this recording.
Is that what this one is? Is 1025?
I think this will be 27, I think. But we have to, in order to put this show out, it costs money. It does. That's the sad reality. It costs us money to make this show happen. And for as little as $5 a month, that's it, $5 a month, which is less than the cost of a beer at this point, or a coffee at Starbucks, you can help support this show. And I think it's really important that people understand that you get to be a part of it. You get stuff for that, right? Yes, you get the satisfaction of knowing you're helping this show happen, but you're going to get some behind the scenes stuff. You're going to get, it's not just you're giving us money. Yes, you are giving us money, but you're helping the show happen, and we're going to give you some stuff too. And so I stole this from another podcast, but don't do it. Do it.
We have
Patreon.com
plenty of stuff.
forward slash Whistlekick.
Yeah. And you and I have talked. We have some big plans for things that we're going to do, but we need the scale first because the things that we're going to do are going to cost us some more money, and we need to grow the Patreon so we can take a little bit of money out to do more things for the people in the Patreon.
And you should support the things that you love. If you go to the movies,
Yeah.
you spend money to go to the movies. You are quote unquote wasting time, right? You're sitting there doing nothing, but you're getting something out of it. You go to a comedy show, you're going to spend money to do that. You get this show for free. You are spending time out of your day enjoying something. Help support that in a way that would really help us. That's all.
Well said. Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Until next time, train hard,
hard, smile,
smile,
and have a
and
great day.
have a great day.